Okay, then now we just move to ordinary sessions from here. The first paper by Jenny Xu from Hong Kong University of Science and Technology on consumption heterogeneity and monetary policy in an open economy. And from here, the presenters have 30 minutes, then 15 minutes discussion followed by a discussant, this time Masashige Hamano, Waseda University, and then 10 minutes of floor discussion goes on. Okay, so Jenny, can you? Yeah, I have to give you a
I cannot share
host status. Wait a second. Yes.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay. Okay, here we go. So, can you see it?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Let me make it full screen. Where should I do it? Okay. Is it full screen?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is.
Okay. Thanks a lot for, first I would like to thank the organizer to include this paper into this very nice conference. And this paper is a joint paper with Sihao Chen from Fudan University, Devereux from UBC, and Kang from CUHK. And you can see from this title, so this paper is about the heterogeneity and monetary policy, but we emphasize that in the open economy. So with the increasing like income and wealth inequality, there's a growing literature incorporating the household heterogeneity into the closed economy Keynesian model. And the basic finding is with the household heterogeneity, the monetary policy transmission mechanism is changed. And there's some papers show that actually monetary policy will become ineffective. There will be monetary trap. Well, the role of household heterogeneity, however, is less explored along the international dimension. So in this paper, what we try to do is we want to study the consumption heterogeneity. We are going to consider two types of agents. One is the hand-to-mouth agent. Another is the normal kind of agent we emphasize in the standard literature. And we are going to introduce this kind of heterogeneity, and we want to explore how the introduction of these consumption heterogeneity is going to affect the international monetary policy transmission mechanism. And also we want to look at how this is going to affect the choice of optimal monetary policy in open economy. So this is the key. By the way, I want to mention that along the way, if there's any question, just go ahead and let me know, and I will try to explain. So we extend the two-agent Keynesian model. So this is what we call the tank model. In the closed economy model, the nice point about the tank model is that it allows for the analytical result. So we are going to do this tank model instead of the Hank model, because if we have Hank model, then the tractability will be lost. So we are going to extend this tank model into a two-country model, in which the heterogeneity of household is characterized by two types of household, which I already mentioned. First one is the recurring household. They have access to the financial market. They can smooth consumption over time by borrowing and lending, and they're like the standard utility maximizing agent in the standard literature. And we are also going to consider the Keynesian household, which is what we call the hand-to-mouth agent. They have no access to the financial market, and then they consume their disposable labor income every period. So they don't have access to the financial market. And in this paper, we're going to assume that the share of Keynesian household is fixed at n, which is belong to 0, 1. And then the benchmark model, we are also going to assume there's same degree of heterogeneity in the two countries, and we're going to relax this assumption in the extended model. So as I said, we want to explore two things. One is the transmission mechanism, and another thing is optimal monetary policy. And because in the international macro literature, we emphasize two kinds of pricing strategies. And we know that the two kinds of pricing strategy is going to give a very different result regarding the optimal monetary policy in open economy. So we are going to consider also the same thing. We are going to consider both the producer currency pricing, that is the PCP, and we're also going to consider the local currency pricing, which is LCP. So PCP is that the price will be set in terms of the producer currency. But in the local currency, LCP, the price will be set in terms of the consumer's currency. Okay, so that's a major difference. Okay, so what is the major finding? So from the traditional wisdom, that is the standard open economy model without the heterogeneous agent. So we call that representative agent model. So we are going to have lower interest rate, and then we are going to household increase their consumption. So the general Euler equation mechanism, and we have production goes up. How about the international transmission mechanism? So as shown in the a pioneering paper by Clarider, Galli, and Gertler, with log consumption preference, the spillover effect on production is very small. So foreign consumption is going to go up due to food risk sharing. Okay, how about in the model with heterogeneity? And also we're going to first assuming that the standard one, that is with producer currency pricing. So in that case, we're going to have, if there's no home bias, we're going to have the PPP hold. And we're also going to have log consumption preference. Well, we find that household heterogeneity is really going to play a role. There will be some ranges that the household heterogeneity is going to imply that the monetary policy become ineffective. We call that a monetary trap. In other words, we're going to have an interest rate cut. It's going to lead to the decline of domestic output. They're also going to be spillover on the foreign output, not like in the standard model. With log consumption, there will be no spillover. Actually, there is going to be spillover. And then the spillover is going to also depend on N, the household heterogeneity. And finally, regarding the optimum policy, interestingly, we still have that because in the standard model, what we have is the domestic monetary policy just need to care about their own PPI, their own domestic PPI. Interesting, we find that even with household heterogeneity, PPI targeting is still the optimum monetary policy, and it actually can restore the economy to the efficient, flexible price equilibrium. How about the result with local currency pricing? And we know that in that case, we are going to have that the PPP does not hold, and there will be deviation from law and price. Again, regarding this monetary trap and spillover, we find that there's still sizable range of household heterogeneity in which monetary policy become ineffective. But this range is going to be different from the PCP case. As I'm going to explain later, this is going to become because in the relative to the closed economy tank model, actually in open economy, we're going to have an extra term of trade effect and relative price effect, which is going to affect the result, make it different from the case of the closed economy tank model, heterogeneity model. How about the optimum money policy? We know that with local currency pricing, there will be currency misalignment. So that is deviation from long-run price due to the local currency pricing. So we find that in this case, you cannot close the monetary authority, cannot close the output gap. Consequently, heterogeneity is going to become a new distortion faced by the policymakers. So in the PCP case, actually, by closing output gap, the heterogeneity is going to disappear. But in the LCP case, it's no longer like that. Heterogeneity is going to become a new distortion faced by policymakers. And this is going to make CPI targeting no longer optimal in most cases, unless we assume there's no home bias and then there's no asymmetric, the heterogeneity is symmetric across countries. Okay, so here come to the related literature. To save time, I think I'm going to just talk it very briefly. Of course, this is related to this paper is related to optimum policy in open economy, but then all these paper is actually does not talk about the household heterogeneity. That's a major difference. And then it's related to the heterogeneous agent New Keynesian model in the closed economy. And the major difference of our paper is that we put that in the international context. And the third strand of literature is heterogeneous agent in open economy. So there are already several papers which study the role of heterogeneity in open economy, but most of them is in small open economy setting. And our paper is in a 2-country setting. And also we a lot of these paper is like introduce Hank. So therefore, there's no tractability, and our result is going to be basically all the result is analytical. So it's very easy to see the intuition. So that's a main difference between our paper and the literature. Okay, so is there any question before I go on? I'm going to talk about the model setup. It's actually very standard, except that we're going to have 2 agents. Okay, so if there's no question, I'm going to go on with the model setup. We're going to build a 2-country DSG model, and we are going to assume complete international market. So this is going to make sure that we are going to have analytical result. And in the baseline model, we're going to assume there's no home bias, and we're going to extend that. We're going to consider incomplete domestic asset market. So there'll be no sharing between the 2 type of agents. A constant measure 1 month's end of household is what I have talked to you, tell you about, that they are recording. So they can have access to the financial market. Another fraction of the household, we call them Keynesian, and they are hand to mouth. They have no access to the financial market. And then, as I mentioned in the benchmark model, we're going to assume that the n equal to n star, but later we're going to relax this assumption. But if we have n equal to n star, we can derive several very interesting and simple intuitive results. And we're going to consider 2 pricing strategy, PCP and LCP. And we're going to focus on the effect of monetary policy shocks, and then we're going to study optimal monetary policy. So that's the basic roadmap. Okay. So we're going to have, first I introduced the problem of the recording household. As I mentioned, it's log utility, log consumption, and then we're going to introduce so it will be in consumption and leisure. So note to pay attention to this omega. So this is the inverse of Frisch elasticity of labor supply, and that is going to play some role in our analysis. So the consumption is a combination of home and foreign goods. And then this, the elasticity of substitution is 1 between the home and foreign goods. And then among the home and foreign goods, elasticity substitution is epsilon. Okay, so this is all very standard in the international macro literature. Budget constraint. So the recording household is going to consume. Okay, so this is CTR. So that's the recording household consumption. They are going to borrow in the domestic market, BT plus 1. And then they are also going to borrow in the complete domestic and international market. So this term, and then also this term is going to be to give us the complete asset market. And this ST is the exchange rate, which is defined as the price of foreign currency in terms of domestic currency. And they're also going to get the share of the equity from the domestic market. And then their labor income, this is their return from holding of domestic bond, holding of the return from in the state contingent bond market. And then this is the dividend, and then the price of the equity holding. So all this is very standard. So you can see that we are going to get the optimal choice. So like I said, they are like a standard intertemporal optimization, optimizing household agent. And then we are going to get the Euler equation and labor supply function. And more important, we have the risk sharing condition. But notice that the risk sharing condition is only for the recording household, because they can only recording household can borrow and lend in the international bond market. Okay. So we have the Keynesian household. Their problem is even easier because they only consume their labor income and they don't have access to the financial market. And we are going to, for tractability, we are going to assume there's no idiosyncratic shocks as in BOB and the Botley and Garley. So they are just going to maximize by the way, the utility function is the same. The utility function is the same. We just changed this superscript S into K. Okay, but then one interesting thing is that given that they don't have access to the financial market, if we get the optimal supply function and then we combine this to budget constraint and the optimal labor supply function, we are going to get that actually the labor supply of the Keynesian household is going to be constant. Okay, by the way, how many time do I have until
Another 17 minutes.
Okay.
Another 12 minutes. 12, sorry.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, so here come to the interesting part, that is the heterogeneity. So we're going to assume that the aggregate consumption is given by the sum of recording household and Keynesian household. But we are going to define the measure of heterogeneity as the share of recording consumption over the total consumption. And then we have, like what we said, this risk sharing condition. So we can rewrite the recording, the Euler equation and the risk sharing condition in terms of total consumption instead of recording consumption. Okay, so I think this part I'm going to skip because this is very standard in the literature. It's just that the production with producer currency pricing and then the production with local currency pricing. The only thing to need to pay attention to is that we're going to define two things. That is, first of all, in the LCP, we're going to have E. So this is actually the ST times P star, PT star over PT star. So this is the real exchange rate. And we're also going to define the deviation from the law of one price. So you are going to see that these terms is going to show up later. Okay. So, and we have the equilibrium, the goods market, the labor market, and then we are going to define the term of trade. So all this is very standard. And we solve the model by normalize the wage by the domestic CPI price, and then do the log linearization. And then, so there's several equations I want to mention. So these equations are those equations independent of pricing strategies. You can see very clearly the consumption of the new Keynesian the consumption of Keynesian household is just a wage. However, the consumption of recording household is going to be equal to wage minus this omega times LTR. So this is coming from the labor supply function. Another very important equation is that under the definition of heterogeneity, using this definition of heterogeneity, HT, we're going to find that this heterogeneity measure is going to be proportional to the output gap. And this is important. And this is coming from the labor supply and the budget constraint. But this is going to give us the optimal money policy result later. So just keep this equation in mind. And the flexible price equilibrium, I'm also going to just skip because this is just to give you the benchmark. And by the way, because we removed the monopoly distortion by tax, the flexible price will be efficient. Okay, so let me talk about the monetary policy shock under PCP. So the monetary policy shock is just going to be we consider nominal interest rate rule, which is just that the interest rate equal to the natural rate plus a monetary shock, mu t hat. And then using the Euler equation, we can derive the output. And then, so this is a key equation, the key proposition. We find that in the two-age and two-country model, when the share of Keynesian household belong to a specific range, there will be a monetary trap in which the expansion monetary policy is going to reduce output. Why? So in the, by the way, I want to mention about in the closed economy case, there's also a range of the monetary trap, but then it's just that when n is small, there's no monetary trap. And when it's larger, there's a monetary trap. But in this PCP case, you can see that it's a range. Only in this range, there's a monetary trap. Why this is the case? I think this is the very important intuition here. So if we rewrite the goods market clearing condition, we are going to get equation 29. And this CTR is the, actually, this is the one there is interest rate cut. We are going to have the consumption is going to increase. So the first term is actually capture the aggregate consumption effect. While we also in the open economy, we have this second term, which is unique in the open economy. And that is different from the closed economy model. The second term is called the term of trade effect. And the aggregate consumption effect can
Sorry,
yes?
can I ask a clarifying question? What is monetary policy? Did you mention what monetary policy is?
Yes, so it's just that it's like mu t hat. It's not, it's just a monetary shock.
Okay, okay, got it. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so here we do not consider the productivity shock. We just consider there's a mu t shock. Okay, so this aggregate consumption effect, which is emphasized in the closed economy literature, it could be positive or negative depending on n. However, this term of trade effect is always positive. Why? Because when you have an interest rate cut in the home country, you are going to have the term of trade is going to benefit. It's going to lead to a relative price decrease in the home country, home goods. And then this is going to increase output. So this is going to give us this different range compared to the closed economy model. When you have lower interest rate, you are going to have CT is equal to the combination of Ricardian household and the consumption of Keynesian household. When n is small enough, notice that this sigma is equal to 1 minus n omega over 1 minus n. So when it's small enough, you are going to have this coefficient is going to be small. So then you are going to have one interest rate cut, CTR is going to increase. So therefore output is going to increase. And also the term of trade is positive. But when n is large enough, we are going to have the sign of CT hat is going to depend on the Keynesian consumption. As shown in BOB, it is impossible to have CTK increase when n is large enough. So I don't have time to go through the detail, but the key point is that if the consumption in demand increase, then the labor supply should increase. But then the labor supply increase implied, because remember the Keynesian household, the labor supply is fixed. So then this is going to imply the LTR has to increase. But then because LTR is showing up here, so LTR is very large, CTR has to decrease. So this contradicts with the fact that CTR should increase when interest rate cut. So we must have the aggregate consumption effect turns negative. So therefore, this is the reason why we are going to have monetary policy become ineffective. But remember, in open economy, we also have the positive term of trade effect. Okay, so this is the aggregate consumption effect. It is positive, but then it becomes negative and very large when in the middle range of n. But then when n increase, because n is going to be 1 over delta, sorry, this should be delta is equal to that. And then there's a typo, there should be delta. So when n become very, very large, you are going to have this term become very, very small. 1 over delta become very small, this term become very large. So you are going to have the aggregate consumption effect again become smaller. So therefore, we are going to have this in the when n is small, both effect is positive, monetary policy is effective. When in the middle range, aggregate consumption effect become very large and dominate the term trade effect. When n gets larger, the aggregate consumption effect becomes small, negative, then it will be dominated by the term of trade effect. Then the economy is going to exit the monetary trap. So this is intuition. So therefore, we are going to have some result which is different from the closed economy case because of the existence of term of trade effect in the open economy. Okay, so how about spillover? So what we find is, again, we are going to have that there's a positive negative spillover, and that is going to depend on n. Why? Because you can see from the 32, this is the output in the case of open economy. And then risk sharing is going to imply CTR is going to increase when we have interest rate cut. But then remember, when home interest rates decrease, it is going to be a negative term of trade effect on foreign output. So when in small, every consumption effect dominate, you are going to have that the domestic monetary policy shock has a positive spillover on foreign. But when it's large, then the term of trade effect dominate, then you are going to have that the spillover effect become negative. Okay, so this is for the PCP. For the LCP, we are going to get something like similar, but not exactly the same. Again, this there will be some kind of monetary trap, and there will be some spillover, and this all depend on n. Okay, so to understand the intuition, so it will be more complicated. So first of all, we're going to have this real exchange rate effect. So that is going to affect the aggregate consumption effect. The second thing is there's be relative price effect. But interestingly, this second term, this relative price effect, is going to be independent monetary policy because it's equal to the output gap. So therefore cannot be affected by the monetary policy, the relative output. So only the aggregate consumption effect is going to play a role. So in this case, we are going to go back to the closed economy case. When n is small, we are going to have output, it will be increased after monetary shock. When n is large, the output will be decreased. So there will be a monetary trap. Okay. So now let me go to the optimal monetary policy. So you can see that we use second order approximation to get the welfare loss function with household heterogeneity. You can see very clearly this HT term is going to show up in the loss function. So this is going to imply that this heterogeneity is going to affect the loss function in the open economy. The planner is going to choose this variable to minimize the global loss and subject to the Keynesian model. And then they also know, but notice that they know that the heterogeneity is proportional to the output gap. And this is going to imply, okay, the solution to the global planners problem under PCP is going to be very easy because what they need to do is just they are going to close the output gap. But when they close the output gap, so this is output gap, sorry, this is output gap, home and foreign, and this is the inflation dispersion. So when they close the output gap, they actually also close the heterogeneity. So therefore, one stone, two birds. So solution to the global planners problem under PCP is going to restore the economy to the flexible price equilibrium. And PPI inflation, again, is an optimal money policy. And then just like the standard New Keynesian model under PCP without heterogeneity. Okay, how about in the local currency pricing? Again, we are going to see that there will be heterogeneity terms, but like in the standard local currency pricing model like Angle 2011, because of the LCP, we have deviation from long price, DT. So this DT terms is also going to show up in the welfare loss function. The planner is going to choose the output gap, inflation, and then term of trade to minimize the global loss function subject to NKPC. I'm not going to write it here. And the result is we find that when there is household heterogeneity, but without home bias, CPI inflation is still the optimal money policy. And that is the same as the model without household heterogeneity. Why? Because with local currency pricing, the output gap cannot be closed. But the relative output is independent of monetary policy rules. So monetary policy can ignore the consumption heterogeneity. By the way, even though CPI inflation is the optimal monetary policy, it cannot restore the economy to the flexible price equilibrium, like in the model without heterogeneity. But then monetary policy is still the optimal way is that they ignore consumption heterogeneity and they choose CPI targeting as the optimal monetary policy. However, if we have household heterogeneity and home bias, then CPI inflation is not optimal monetary policy under the LCP. Okay, so how many minutes do I have left?
2 or 3 minutes, you can go.
Okay. So here I'm just going to talk very briefly about the extension with asymmetric household heterogeneity. You can see that this heterogeneity is still proportional to the output gap. And we still have that the risk sharing condition hold. So then if we have in the asymmetric case, we have that heterogeneity is going to magnify the impact of domestic monetary policy. And also without domestic heterogeneity, the impact of domestic monetary policy shocks is unaffected by the foreign heterogeneity. And also about spillover, it is actually going to increase the spillover monetary policy shocks by the heterogeneity in the source country or the host country. So if N or N star increase, the spillover effect will be larger. And also the spillover effect is going to depend on whether there is no heterogeneity in the source country or in the host country. Okay, finally, about the monetary policy, when we have asymmetric N, we still have that PPI inflation is the best, and it can actually restore the economy to the flexible price equilibrium. However, under LCP, again, CPI inflation is not going to be optimal monetary policy under this LCP case. Okay, so conclusion. So this paper incorporates household heterogeneity, that is Ricarding versus Keynesian, into the standard two-country model and study how consumption heterogeneity is going to affect the transmission mechanism of monetary policy and the choice of optimal monetary policy in open economy. The basic finding that the heterogeneity is going to matter. Matter for spillover, matter for the monetary policy effect in the domestic economy, and also matter for the optimal monetary policy. there will be sizable range of consumption heterogeneity in which monetary policy is going to become ineffective. Also, the spillover is going to depend on this the consumption heterogeneity. And also the optimal monetary policy is going to be affected. However, in the case of PC, it's very different between the PCP and LCP. In the PCP, domestic stabilizing PPI is still the optimal monetary policy. But in the case of LCP, the consumption heterogeneity is going to create a new distortion, and that cannot be corrected by the monetary policy. Therefore, if there's no home bias and there's no asymmetric heterogeneity, CPI is the optimal monetary policy. But if we relax that, CPI no longer is the optimal monetary policy. Okay, so that's the presentation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll stop my sharing and then let the discussant.
Yeah. Now have a discussion discussing the Professor Hamano at Waseda University. I will give you a co-host status with the second.
I think it appears with Masa.
Masa.
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. So do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, let me get this in full screen. Okay, so thank you very much for giving me this opportunity in discussing such a very interesting paper. So my name is Masashige Hamano from Waseda University. And so let me summarize the paper first quickly. So, the paper incorporates heterogeneous households, and by assuming that, a fraction of households in the economy is limited in terms of, asset market participation. And that fraction is captured by N. And the basic mechanism of the paper is the following. So when there is a monetary expansion, so the nominal rate becomes lower. And with the intertemporal substitution, higher current consumption materializes for Ricardian households. But how does aggregate consumption change? It depends on the presence of Keynesian households. And as Jenny explained beautifully, when N, so the fraction of Keynesian households increases, aggregate consumption may fall. And specifically under producer currency pricing, this fast aggregate consumption effect changes the direction, the signs, but different from the closed economy setup, in open economy, we have this second term that they call the terms of trade effect, which is always positive. So when there is a expansionary monetary policy shock, so the terms of trade depreciates for that country, and it boosts somehow the production of that country. And because this, we see always these positive relations between the terms of trade and output. Okay. So different from the closed economy setup, monetary policy, can be free from monetary trap. In closed economy, monetary policy tend to be really ineffective because of this fast term due to the presence of the Keynesian households. But in open economy, it somehow mitigates monetary trap phenomena. And it changes also the transmission of the policy to foreign countries, depending on these very similar setups. And the paper explains many, results, and I think 11 propositions. And in particular, they look at different specifications. So what happens when the size of Keynesian household is different across countries? And what happens under local currency pricing? and what happens, for the optimal monetary policy and PCP and LCP. But the main message from the policy and the LCP that I get is that still producer price inflation targeting is a good policy. Even under the case of LCP, with very specific assumptions on the preference, we can restore the same policy prescriptions. Yes, so this is a brief summary, and let me discuss the paper. So my first point is related to the setup of the model. So in the literature, it is known that the terms of trade plays a very important role for the risk sharing. And in the model, they put allowable state contingent securities, but with Cobb-Douglas aggregator, with Cobb-Douglas aggregator, even there is no international lending and borrowing. So the case of the balance the trade, the risk sharing operates through the terms of trade fluctuations. So this is a result of the core and of third. And is this true also in this model? So by having Keynesian household, this is my first comment. And by looking at the solution under the flexible price, since we don't see any, consumption heterogeneities across, two different types of households, this seems a case. And put differently, even with the limited asset market participation and the presence of the Keynesian household, it seems that there is a perfect consumption risk sharing across countries and within countries. So because Keynesian households also consume the same set of consumption goods. So if the terms of trade changes, they could benefit that changes. So this is my comment or more precisely question. So I want to see a clear discussion on the issue. And further, maybe it's nice to check whether the allocation under the flexible price is a first best, because even with Cobb-Douglas aggregator, but with some specific shocks, as Devereux and with my paper shows, it may not be the case, right? If there is maybe there is a distortion related to the financial market still. So I want to see a discussion on the issue related to the terms of trade, fluctuations. So this is my first comment. And the second comment is related to the elasticity of labor supply, omega. So as Jenny explained that omega stands for the inverse of the fresh elasticity of labor supply. But as you may have noticed that by setting omega equal to 0, so basically by assuming an infinite elasticity of labor supply, almost all the result seems to be collapsed because omega appears always with n multiplied by omega, right? So for instance, when the discussion of the monetary trap, monetary trap exists in the open economy for this range of n. But by setting omega is equal to 0, this range disappears. So I'm wondering what is the role in the paper played by this elasticity of labor supply. So does elasticity of labor supply mitigate the problem related to the limited asset market participation? I would like to see the clear intuition behind of this elasticity of labor supply. And the last comment is about the variability of exchange rate, and this is also related to the exercise regarding the local currency pricing versus producer currency pricing. So in the literature, since the distortion, the nominal distortion in the economy is related to the nominal rigidities, right? So the central banks under PCP like to target the nominal rigidity. So by looking at the domestic producer price inflations. But under local currency pricing, since exporters take into account, the future fluctuation in the nominal exchange rate, central bank should also need to consider this dimension, right? So this is a kind of another nominal distortion in the model. And as Devereux and Engel showed, as a result of this, further distortions, maybe is a fixed exchange rate dominate the flexible exchange rate regimes. So the central bank in both countries try to limit somehow the fluctuation of the nominal exchange rate. And I'm wondering what happens in this paper, because it seems that there's no discussion about the variability of the nominal exchange rate under the LCP. So how the result is going to be different by having n positive, so the presence of the Keynesian households. So these are my main comments, and I have other small comments. I think it's nice to look at also how the monetary policy impacts the inequality. Maybe this is not the focus of the paper, but I would like to really see how H index changes according to the monetary policy. And I would like also to see the exact solution for other variables. So in the paper, the authors present only the main variables, but I'm curious to see how labor supplies, wages, and consumption of Keynesian households, move with technology and monetary shocks. And related to this, maybe it's nice to show somehow numerically and intuitively how these endogenous variables changes with respect to n, so the size of Keynesian households. And how about to discuss data pricing? So in the literature, PCP, LCP, and DP data pricing are the three categories that we typically discuss. So it's very nice to have data pricing. And at some point I didn't very understand much the intuitions, for instance, under the flexible price, they say that there's no consumption neutrality across households, but I didn't understand very much the logic on this result. So that's all. Thank you very much, and maybe I need to stop sharing, or I keep my slides on the screen.
Thank you very much, Hamano-san. Jenny, can you
respond?
reply?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I think all the thank you very much. Thank you very much, Masashige, for discussing this paper. I think it's all very useful comments and very nice suggestions. So I'm just going to respond very briefly. First question is about the risk sharing across countries. I think you are perhaps right. When we have log utility and when we have like the Cobb-Douglas elasticity between the home and foreign household, in the closed economy case, actually we are going to have perfect risk sharing. We don't need to assume that there's some state contingent asset market. In this case, because the existence of Keynesian household, we actually also introduced the complete market. I think that, but you're right, by looking at the solution under the flexible price, we have this, the heterogeneity goes to 0. So this seems that we don't need to, we also will have this result. So I think I'm going to check that whether the result is going to hold. If we don't have this perfect risk sharing, we don't have its incomplete market, we're still going to get, but if we have this Cobb-Douglas utility, and then we have this log utility, we're still going to have this result. So I think I'm going to check about that. And then regarding the flexible price, whether this is the first best, I think this is going to be, okay, so that's the first one. Can we go to the second slide? Oh, yeah, sorry, the first one, the flexible price, is it the first best? I think in this paper it is, because we have that the heterogeneity is going to be proportional to the output gap. And that is a very interesting and simple result. And given that, when you under the flexible price, we are going to have that the heterogeneity is going to be 0. So this is going to imply output gap will be 0. And because of we remove the monopoly distortion, so this all the distortion in this economy is going to be gone, and then we are going to have the first best. So that will be the efficient allocation. Okay, and then this omega equal to 0. So can you go to the second comment? I think that's a very nice point. You're right. Actually, when this omega show up, it usually gets showed up together with n, and n is the heterogeneity. So if we have omega goes to 0, perhaps a lot of result is going to change. The intuition is a nice point. So my guess is that when omega goes to 0, we are going to have infinite elastic labor supply. And in this case, a lot of the mechanism implied by the heterogeneity is going to perhaps disappear. So that is why we no longer have the monetary trap. And then also a lot of the result is going to change. I guess it's because a lot of heterogeneity is working through the labor supply, the different labor supply of the Keynesian household and the Ricardian household. So when we have inelastic labor supply, perhaps a lot of channel that is in this brought by this heterogeneity is going to disappear. Okay, and then the next one, it's about the Devereux angle, so the fixed exchange regime. I think the Devereux angle paper is built on the one period preset price setting. But in our model, it's like in the dynamic price setting. So this is going to imply we are not going to have, we always have the inflation dispersion in the welfare loss function. So therefore, in this case, we're not going to have fixed exchange regime. It's going to be the optimum policy. Instead, it is going to, even in the standard literature without heterogeneity, the CPI targeting is shown in the Angle 2011 AER paper. So there will be we don't have this variability of exchange rate, but instead we have this DT, that is the deviation from law and price. And that is the difference between the home and the goods that is sold in home and the home goods sold is in foreign. Because of preset price, there is a deviation from law and price. And that is going to replace the variability of exchange rate in the loss function. And as shown by Angle, so to eliminate this, because of the currency misalignment, so we call that currency misalignment, it's impossible to go back to the flexible price equilibrium, but still the central bank, by choosing the CPI targeting, they can eliminate, they can reduce this distortion. And then this is going to be optimum policy. I think our paper is going to follow that, that kind of, that logic. Okay. Numerical result, I think all the points are well taken. We should add this to the current analysis to make sure the reader understand the dynamic of these variables in the when we have n change. And dollar currency pricing is a very nice point. Currently, I don't know if the dollar currency pricing is going to, I think it will be very similar. It will be more similar to the LCP case, because we still have deviation from law price, and we should still have that in the loss function, and we should have that the like in the output function, we should have there is going to be term of trade, and then there'll be the real exchange rate. But whether the result, my guess it will be more similar to the LCP case. We're going to have spillover, which is going to affect by n, and we're going to have that the optimum policy is not going to restore the flexible price equilibrium. So that's my guess, because it's like still going to be lead to the deviation from law and price. The last point, consumption neutrality. So, so do you mean HT hat is equal to 0? I guess that is because when we have flexible price equilibrium, we have that the price dispersion term is going to disappear, and that's perhaps lead to this consumption neutrality result. But I have to check in detail. Yeah, check the detail. Yes, thanks a lot. I think it's a very nice comments. And will I get the slides?
Yes, yes, of course, of course.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the paper. Thank you very
so-
much.
Thank you. Are there any questions from floor or online? Yes, please, Asunuma, go ahead.
Thanks so much for nice presentation and discussions for both of you. Can I ask one quick question? So if I understand correctly, Jenny,
Sorry?
the consumption heterogeneity is also about a distortion, right? You can think of, right? So
Right.
which distortion is going to be critical? Is it more the price stickiness or the consumption heterogeneity?
It's
Technically,
going to be what? It's going to be, so they are going to be present in both cases. But in the PCP case, it turns out that so the central bank can correct the price dispersion without any problem. But then in the PCP case, because in the PCP case, the HT, the consumption heterogeneity is proportional to the output gap. So by closing the output gap, they can also close the heterogeneity. But this is no longer the case in the LCP. You can close the basically is that they can still try to, because of the presence of the DT, even though they try to close the inflation, the price dispersion, they cannot fully get rid of this the deviation from long price. And meanwhile, also this the output gap is going to be, the relative output is going to be independent of money policy. So what they are going to do is they are going to try to focus on the price side and then leave basically the output side together with the consumption heterogeneity. So I think I hope that I answer your question.
All right, I think my question is slightly different. So technically you have 2 degrees of distortion, right? It didn't like interact, right? Then I think you're talking about sort of 2 cases with 2 pricing, technically the producer pricing and local currency pricing, right?
Right.
The question is, if you think about overall warfare, which benefit do you can get from the technical destination country? If you think about home country, the host countries, and also the
I see. So you mean like from the global optimal policy,
right.
how much does home gain and how much does
Exactly.
foreign gain? Oh, that's a very interesting question. Actually,
Yeah.
in this paper, we did not look at that. But my guess is it will be depend on the spillover. So
Exactly.
right. So I think that it will depend on N. So whether how much the home gain or how much the foreign gain is going to depend on M, because this is going to depend on the spillover. So I guess, so compare the optimal money policy versus the case where there's no optimal money policy, that's one case. Another case is we look at the Nash, but I think the Nash equilibrium is perhaps much harder in this case. So I cannot say too much about the coordination gain because we haven't work out the Nash equilibrium. And also in this complete market setting, there'll be some question about whether we can do this Nash. So, but I think what we can do is about this, what you said, this inactive money policy versus global money policy and see how this gain is going to be affected by this N. I think that's a nice point. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Shioji-san, please.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Jenny, for a very interesting presentation. I guess my question is probably almost the same as the second point of the Hamano-san, but I think in your paper you introduced heterogeneity across households in two aspects. First, they differ in their consumption behaviors, but at the same time, they differ in the labor supply.
Right. Because of the fact that they don't have access. Yes.
So is there a way to somehow separate those two and just talk about, for example, the effect of the consumption heterogeneity only? Because I have no prior expectation on whether the poor households or the constrained households are more elastically supplying labor or less elastic, right? So if you can separate those two aspects, that will be very informative, I think. Thank you.
Right. I think that's a very nice point. We basically follow the tank literature in the closed economy, and I think in the to get as in Bilby and the second paper, So in their paper, they also have this problem, but I think you are right. So this basically with this assumption of don't have access to the market and with together this log utility, we are going to have that the labor supply will be constant. But I guess is that if we relax the utility function into from the log utility into the CRA constraint, this is going to be, we no longer have that, the labor supply will be very different, I guess. So in that case, we are going to perhaps do what you suggest. And in the following project, we are relaxing this log utility consumption. And in this case, the result will be actually more interesting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. I just want one question related to your paper, but it's thinking about first Martin Uribe's paper. So in the end, you said in the LCP, it's very difficult to eliminate currency misalignment. Is it possible to somehow, by introducing, capital control or macroprudential approach, whatever we call, that can eliminate to achieve a combination of capital control and monetary policy can achieve optimal, economic.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. Actually, we have a paper, Mick and I, and then the same set of authors have a paper, but it's not on the heterogeneity. But we have a paper to show that if we introduce, but not the macroprudential policy, but then it's actually the tax policy. So because the key thing is that the deviation from long price, the relative price is not the same across countries. So if we introduce the tax policy on the goods, actually we can restore, we can eliminate this deviation from long price. So in that paper, we show that if we introduce this kind of policy, then this deviation from the long price is going to be eliminated. And in that case, even in the LCP, the central bank do not need to focus on the foreign prices. They can just target their own PPI, and that is the optimal money policy. And in this paper, we also look at that case, and the same result, the same logic applies. If we introduce this kind of tax policy to get rid of this deviation from long price, actually CPI will be the optimal money policy. PPI will be the optimal policy, because again, we are going to eliminate the effect of deviation from long price. And then in that case, we're going to have that the output gap is going to be proportional to HT, and then all the thing is going to go back to the PCB case, because there's no more deviation from long price. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks a lot for asking that question, because I don't have time to talk about that.
Great. Thank you very much. Then we have a short break. Maybe the session 2 starts 10:45.
Oh, I see there's another
question. Oh, sorry.
Juan Sanchez has a question. Juan.
Juan? Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Juan, sorry, I missed.
Okay.
One more question. Juan?
Okay. Very nice.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Jenny. Yeah. Yes, I can.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was, I apologize for arriving a bit late, so I don't know, I may have not understood fully. But I was interested, and it was in some of the comments, and I don't know if you mentioned it, but if you can say something about the effect on inequality. So I think you talk about the effect of inequality, but how say monetary policy affects inequality in the model.
Right. Yes. I think the Masashige also mentioned that point. But to do that, we need to relax this N, that is exogenous fixed in our current model. And we are working on a project to relax that. And that is called, in that case, we're going to allow this N to be affected by this monetary policy and perhaps also productivity shocks. But this result, it turns out that we're still working on that project, but it turns out that this result is going to be, there will be an extra term in the Euler equation, and which is going to create an actual channel through which the interaction between monetary policy and the inequality. And that's, I think that there's a lot of interesting results from that paper as well. But in this paper, we are going to, because the result is already quite a lot. So that's why we focus on the fixed N. But you're right. I think that's a very interesting extension of this to endogenize N and make that to be affected by the monetary policy. I think if we allow N to be endogenous, decided by the monetary policy, a lot of results may be somehow mitigated, but I think the key intuition may still applies. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay.
Thank you very much. Then we end this session. The next session starts 10:45. See you soon.
Okay, see you soon. Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
for
thank you.
everyone's
Thanks very
question.
much.